and that subject is knowledge, ilm. How many types of knowledge are there? How much knowledge can we attain? And how we can best use this knowledge to live our lives so that we can recognize our purpose of existence and be true to our being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this brief portion of a verse that I have recited, وَإِنَّهُ, and with him, مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ, are the keys of the world that is unseen. Alimul Ghaib, the keys to that world are with him, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ya'limuha, nobody knows those, illahu, except him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows ilmul ghaib. Nobody else knows that. So what good is that to us? If nobody else knows, then how can we really benefit from it? This is the point that we have to understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his messengers and by his traditions and by the way he has run his universe, has transferred this information to us, this knowledge to us, that he has all the knowledge of the unseen, but he gives from it to whosoever he pleases, in the amount that he chooses to give. He gives his messengers, his prophets, and other beloved people certain knowledge, certain information, just like he gave Khizr al-Islam certain information that he was doing his work, just like he gave information to most messengers, and they were able to do God's work by his permission, of course. So there is this knowledge of the unseen. There are two parts from that we have to know about. One, knowledge of the unseen is personal. That only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that. That's a personal knowledge that he has. The other is the given personal knowledge. I had given an example the other day that if I tell one of you that I'm going to put $20 bill in my pocket, and that during a conversation later on I'll ask everybody, do you know what I have in my pocket? And you will not be able to tell. But the person that knows, person who I told that I am putting $20 bill here, I'll ask him, what do I have in here? And he will say, you have $20 bill. How does he know? Because I have told him, and I had that knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does the same thing. He gives whatever knowledge he wants to give to whosoever he wants to give, and that is called a given knowledge. The person who has that knowledge for that moment cannot say that I am alimul ghaib. He is not the one that really knows ghaib. He only knows what has been given to him for specific time, about the specific quantity that he can transmit or he can tell others. Now I'll give you an example here of someone. I want you to pay attention and see if you can get the point. There was a young man in England. In his early age, he accepted Islam because there are many people in England that have Islamic faith. Many people from African countries in India and Pakistan have migrated there and are Muslim faith. So he accepted Islam, that young man. And as he was reading Quran and he read the story about the throne of Bلقیس and Prophet Solomon, and how the throne of Bلقیس, the Queen Bلقیس, was brought to their meeting in a blink of an eye. So this young man, an Englishman, his name was Arnold, he could not understand how could that be possible. So he continued to question himself and question himself. And then one day he mentioned to one of the Muslim brothers that he was learning from that he's having difficulty understanding this thing in Quran. Not that I'm denying it, he says, but I can't understand how within a blink of an eye a throne can come from such a distance. So the other guy just tried to explain it to him that with Allah everything is possible, but he still did not really have the full belief within his heart. And one day somebody told him, why don't you go to Pakistan? There are a lot of people there with all kinds of spiritual knowledge. Maybe you will be able to get the answer to your question. Also in his heart, something also inspired him to come. So he comes to Lahore, where there is a shrine of Dada Ali Ajweri, Dada Ganjbash. So he basically was in Lahore for a few days. After sightseeing, one day he was going by, he suddenly felt attracted to go to that place. And his friends that were giving him the tour took him there. And as he went there and he was standing suddenly, and he had this question in his mind as to who should he ask. Suddenly a person, an elderly person, came from the other side and he appeared to him and he said, can I ask you a question? And the elderly man said, before you ask me a question, we can ask that. Let's have a cup of tea. And he said, okay. So how do you like your tea and this and that? And he must have mentioned it. Anyway, next thing he knows, the man puts his hand in the back, takes out his hand, the right hand, and gives it to this young man, this British guy, English guy. He looks at the cup, and this is exactly the same cup that he has at home, that he drinks his tea every day. He recognized that, and the saucer, and he says, this is my cup from England. How did it get here? He says, does that answer your question? They said, yeah, but they sat down and had a cup of tea. He was absolutely out of his mind as to how can this be possible. Next thing he knows, he opens his eyes and there is nobody sitting in front of him. The person who was sitting is no longer there. But the man already had his answer, that this can happen. Few years, the man decided to stay there in Lahore, and he died there. He's buried close to that shrine. And I have a photograph of the shrine. It's somewhere here in my camera. So this is a true, real story whereby you can really understand how that throne was brought, how his cup. You see, I have, to tell you the truth, I have cups that I like to take tea in. I have one of those in my daughter's home. I have one of those in my son's home. So whenever I go, they know that